Hey everybody, and welcome to another JASP tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to be looking at how to calculate new columns, and in particular I'm interested in how to create a column that's created of new z-scores based on a variable that we've been working with. So let's go ahead and open up a data set. I'm going to be opening up the data set from chapter 2 that we looked at, which was looking at overall ranks and for each country in terms of their happiness scores. So you may remember this already. So how do we use this? What we want to do, how we want to analyze this, is we have all these values, right? So I see that Finland seems to be the happiest country, and it's because they have a 7.79. But how does that compare to the mean, right? How does that compare to the mean? If we scroll through this, we can eyeball the data, but that's not super helpful. We want to find out how these different values stack up to the mean, and we can do that very easily by looking at their individual z-scores. And you don't want to have to calculate those by hand, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a column that's going to tell us the z-score for all of these countries over here. Alright, so what we're going to do in order to do this is we're going to click over here to create a new column. So we're creating a new column in our data, and I'm going to call this, what do I want to call this? I'm going to call this Z happiness, which is actually French for happiness, is Z happiness. Sorry, don't dislike this video because I said that. And then we're gonna create a column. You do have the option to kind of to play around with the different scales, but for most of your purposes, you're going to be using just regular scale right here. Alright, so once we click on that, you can see that now we have a new column, but we also have this stuff up here. So this up here, this new kind of window that we have, is going to be a way for us to create this new column. So over here on the left hand side, you see that we have the different variables that we've been working with, and over here on the right you can see that we have different symbols that are going to respond to different calculations that we can work with. Okay, so let's go. I'm just going to jump right in. How do we calculate the z-score? So the way that we're going to do that, remember what a z-score is. A z-score is taking a raw value, subtracting from it the mean value, and then dividing all that by the standard deviation. Alright, sounds like a headache, right? It's not so bad. Here we go. So we know that score, if you remember, that's our happiness value, right? So we're going to take our raw value, so we're going to go through all of these, we're going to take those scores, and we are going to subtract from it. So we're going to come up here to these different operators, and we are going to select the subtraction button. And now what we want to do is we want to drag over the operator, or the function for the mean. So you can look through some of these. If you don't know what these mean off the top of your head, you can hover over them and it'll tell you what they are. So it tells you variance, the summation of these values. We want to find the mean, and we can do that by scrolling down just a little bit, and now we see mean. And so we're going to drag this over, and now it's asking us what values do we want to subtract. So we want the mean of what though? We want to use the mean of the score. And so now we want to cap all this off by selecting division, and we want to divide that by the standard deviation of that value. So I'm going to go over here and select standard deviation, drag that there, and again it's asking, you want the standard deviation of what values though? We want the standard deviation of the score. Alright, so we have all that. Just double check to make sure that formula looks correct. That looks correct to me to measure the z-score. And so now I'm going to select this big button that says compute column, and you cross your fingers and then you calculate it, and oh wow. Alright, so what does this mean? We have Finland has a z-score of 2.12, which means that Finland's happiness score is 2 standard deviations above the mean. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we can see South Sudan and the Central African Republic, they have values that are -2 or beyond -2. And what that means is that that they are 2 standard deviations below the global average. And then we can find the country that probably has the mean. by looking at the one that's closest to 0, the z-score that's closest to 0. And so we can see that the mean is then going to be somewhere between the Dominican Republic and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that's probably where the average, the mean happiness rating is, and we can identify that very quickly using this happiness score right here. So if we want to, sometimes in your research you might be interested in, okay, I'm gonna X that out because we've just calculated that. We feel pretty good about it. If we wanted to, we can edit that by clicking on this function right here. So again, if you didn't see that, up here in the column, if you click on the function, it opens this up, and then you can add in or you can edit these things. You could, if you wanted to, you could draw, you could bring in these different values and mess it all up if you wanted to. So I'm not going to do that because I like where I am right here, but you can always edit it if you need to. Another thing that you might want to do in your own research or on a future assignment is to create what's called a composite variable. And usually the composite variable is whenever you have a bunch of scores that you've collected and you added them up to some kind of sum total. So let's take a look at how we could do that. We could do that by, I'm just going to call this total, total values. It doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do here is I want to take all of these individual predictors of happiness and I'm going to add them up just to kind of see what's going on. So we can do that by, I think this is probably much easier. I'm going to take the GDP, I'm going to add that in there, and I'm going to add to that social support. I'm going to add to that healthy life expectancy. And I'm going to add to that the freedom to make life choices. I'm going to add to that the generosity of the community. And then I'm going to add to that the perceptions of corruption. All right. So just to make sure this look right, so we're going to be adding GDP and that. We're adding all these variables together. It's perfect. I'm going to compute that column. And now you can see we have these new values, which are basically, they're not our happiness score, but it is kind of like calculating, each, if you wanted to do this by hand, you can check the math, but you're adding all these columns together to give you this new composite score. And so you can see it's not 100% the case, but it does seem to be roughly the trend that the higher this score is, whenever you add up all these, roughly correlates with the happiness score right here. So these down here are lower, half lower, and if we wanted to, we could even test that out by looking at the scatter plot just to test that. So I'm going to do total values and score. I'm going to plot that. Yep, and it's a very strongly positive correlation. Cool, which is exactly what you would have expected. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it. So hopefully that was helpful to kind of explain how to compute these variables. It's a little bit trickier, I think, than it is in SPSS or some of the other statistical programs, but pretty easy once you get the hang of it. Alright, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you around. Bye.